Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Jenny Dildine, the LDS Mission Coach, and you are listening to the LDS Mission Podcast, episode number 227, Hitting a Language or Growth Plateau. I'm Jenny, the LDS Mission Coach, and whether you're preparing to serve a mission, currently serving, a returned missionary, or a missionary mama like me, I created this podcast just for you. Are you searching for epic confidence, ready to love yourself and to learn the how of doing hard things? Then let's go. You totally already have what it takes to step powerfully into your potential and never question your purpose again. It's time to embrace yourself, embrace your mission, embrace your life, and embrace what's next. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. I am really enjoying the fall, which if you know anything about me, this is a new skill that I have gained, is learning to like fall. I actually did a whole podcast episode about this last fall where I decided that it didn't make sense to not like the fall because it led into winter. And I had a friend tell me, you know what, it might be better if you just didn't like winter because then you only don't like really one season of the year. Anyway, so I did all this work to like something that I don't like, that I learned how to do that. And so if you want to go find that episode, that would be fun. But it's been fun to observe myself the way that I have this fall been able to just sort of, I don't know, just think it's pretty outside and really treasure the sun when it's out and just kind of, I actually bought a fall candle all by myself and been burning that. So it's been a great October for me. So how is your October going? Today, I want to talk about this podcast episode was originally just called Hitting a Language Plateau. But as I started thinking about it, I started thinking that a lot of these concepts can apply in many areas of our lives. And so it can apply if you're with any growth goal. So maybe you're training to run a marathon, or maybe you're a college freshman, or maybe you're at a new job and you're training and getting some expertise in a new area. I think a lot of these concepts will be able to help you. And so let me tell you a quick reason about why I started thinking about this concept is actually because I had two missionaries that I was working with over the last couple of weeks that got on the call. One had been out 8 months, one is out 10 months, and both of them got on the call and they had the same concern. They said that they felt like they had made all of this progress with the language up until that point in their missions, but then they felt like, and they both used the same word, that they had hit a plateau with learning the language. So I thought this was really interesting. And since it came up twice this week, I decided to kind of focus on that this week. And so this could also be applied to just like learning on the mission. It could be applied to learning when you get home from the mission, or like getting back into the swing of things with school. And so I just thought this was really interesting kind of idea about how we feel like we reach a certain point and then we just kind of coast there for a while without much progress. And so both of these missionaries were saying, you know, I really need to get back at doing my language study. I really need to focus more and make some progress. And there was a lot of reasons as we talked through this that they felt like they needed this to continue progressing. And today we're going to talk about some of those reasons and which one of them might be helpful and which one of those reasons might not be helpful. Also, some kind of just thoughts that I noticed them both having and how we were able to sort of make sense of those thoughts and decide if they were helpful or not for them to continue on their growth journey within the language, or if you're applying this to something else, with whatever it is that you are working on. So there's a few kind of topics I want to cover, and we'll just kind of start to work through them. So the first thing is I want us to notice the power of when we label something. So both of these missionaries said, I feel like I've hit a plateau. Now, if you've learned anything over the last little while of listening to my podcast, you know how much power those thoughts that our brain offers us has, okay? Those thoughts have so much power that when we think a thought, it's a literal synapse that connects in your brain, sends emotion through your body. Now, interestingly, what tends to happen, it is called confirmation bias. Whatever we're thinking or believing, our brains will go to work to try to prove that thought true. So basically, if we have the belief or the thought, I've hit a plateau, that's going to maybe make us feel discouraged. That discouragement is going to drive a set of actions like fuel in a car, where we actually, interestingly, kind of shut down and study less when we're discouraged. And then what ends up happening is we make that thought true. Our brain goes to work proving that thought true to the point where we actually are in a plateau. So the first thing I want to kind of pay attention to is your thoughts and how you're thinking about where you're at with the language or whatever goal you have that you're working on really does matter. That if you believe you're stuck, guess what will happen is you will get stuck. Now, some of you, I like to differentiate always on this podcast between things that are circumstantially facts that could be proven in a court of law and things that are just beliefs or thoughts. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, well, that's just a fact that you've hit a plateau, that you're not growing anymore. And we can call it a fact, but if we call it a fact, we lose power over it because facts we don't always have control over. But if it's a belief that I've hit a plateau or that I'm stuck, then we have power, agency, and influence to change that thought. And then to change the way we feel, and then in the process, change our outcome and our result. So that would be my first suggestion. If you feel like you've hit a plateau, let's just not call it that. Let's call it something like I'm on my way to something better, or I'm figuring out how to take the next steps, or I'm working towards what the next evolvement of my language study looks like. Okay. So number 2, if you are working on a goal and you find yourself kind of in this plateau area, which again, I just said not to call it that, but I'm going to keep using that example so that we all understand where we're at. If you find yourself here where your growth is kind of stalled or whatever's going on, I highly recommend that we tap into the why or the emotional fuel that's fueling you to learn the language or to achieve this goal. Now, when I was talking to these missionaries, what was interesting about that, right, is what their brains were kind of focused on was actually the semantics of the language or the placement of the accents or the conjugation. In their minds, they weren't perfect yet with the language. And so what we kind of talked about, which was really an interesting kind of concept, is I just asked them, why do you want to be better at speaking the language? And at first they didn't really come up with anything, but as we kind of talked through it, what we discovered is that actually they wanted to do it because they wanted to communicate more clearly and to show up in love for the people that they were communicating with. And trying to change or grow from love is such a more useful fuel than discouragement or something else, or shame or guilt, okay, or pressure or stress. And when we really think about this, you guys, if you are a missionary at all, or if you're trying to accomplish a goal at all, it actually is really a loving thing that we try to learn the language or that we try to accomplish certain goals, especially if your goals are meant to serve or help other people. So the example I have of this was a couple of weeks ago. I went to Canada, went to Quebec City. So shout out to all the missionaries that are serving there in that area in Canada. I actually loved it there. It was so cool. And it was way more French than I would have guessed. And so when my husband and I, we kind of went across a bridge to a little island, and we were driving around and looking at the views and getting some current ice cream and like the stuff that's native to do there, out kind of towards the more rural part of town. And we went to this one place where we got to like do some cheese tasting and things like that, which was super fun. Now, the guy who was working there, his first language was French. And he said to us, he said, I would like to speak your language. I would like to speak English, even though my English isn't super good. And what was so interesting is what that showed me is that he cared about us and that he cared about our experience. Now, you may run into people on the mission who are just annoyed that you can't speak the language the way that they think you should, right? But that tells us way more about where they're at in their own head with their own emotions than it actually tells us about your ability to communicate. Like if you can come at this growth and getting through this language plateau from love, from wanting to communicate better with the people, right? That takes you so far. It actually becomes more about your ability or your effort to communicate, not just your vocabulary. And I think, I'm not fluent in any other languages, but I think that people will get a sense of that when you're talking to them, even if you're doing it imperfectly. That people will get a sense if you're just like hard on yourself and beating yourself up and doing it out of pressure and super perfectionistic about it versus you just like, hey, I really care about you. I would love to try to speak in your language. Okay. So 3 is watch out for other motivations or not awesome motivations to want to grow and change. Okay. So I did ask one of the missionaries, I was like, okay, so tell me why. Why do you want to get better at the language? Why do you want to study it more? What are you after? And here's some of the things that she came up with just off the top of her head, right? This was all probably coming just from her lower caveman brain that is always looking for problems. So she said, there's a lot of expectations on me. I feel pressure, the comparison, of course, and then the fear of judgment. So with the expectations, it was sort of like this belief I should be further along. With the pressure, it was others expect me to be better when I'm talking to them. The comparison, of course, is like she's better at Spanish than I am, or my district leader is better at Spanish than I am. And then the fear of judgment. One of these missionaries was actually asked to give a prayer in the zone conference for in the language, in Spanish. And so notice how all of these thoughts and beliefs come from expectations, pressure, comparison, fear of judgment, come from fear, lack, and scarcity, which is I'm not good enough, or I have a ways to go, or I'm afraid that I won't blank. So here's what we came up with was maybe the best reason, is just because she wanted to. She wanted to communicate better. She wanted to really be interested in what it could look like to take her language to the next level, to, communicate with love, and kind of like the guy in Quebec City who communicated with, he was really genuinely just wanting to connect in that way and give it a go. And so that to me is a beautiful motivation, just because you want to. Now, your brain, of course, is going to default to fear-based thinking, right? It's okay. This is where our brain always starts. That's its job. But if you can notice if you're kind of caught in those traps, and then don't let that part of your brain, the fear-based part, lead you. Because first of all, it'll probably try to shut you down. Second of all, when you're stressed about it, you're just not going to make as much progress as you want to. You'll actually stay stuck longer. Okay, I do want to address this number 4, which was one of the sister missionaries I was talking to was worried because someone had told her that maybe God would take away her language skills or her quote unquote gift of tongues. And between her and I, we just really decided, does that even make sense that God would give you a gift and then take it away? I mean, maybe you can think about this however you want, but she was using it as a way to sort of like scare herself or guilt herself into not practicing it, right? Or into practicing it. I'm sorry, and to get better at it. But again, when it's guilt and fear, it's not going to fuel a super useful emotion. The way I kind of choose to think about it, and you can take this or leave it, but like when you give someone a gift, you don't need to know like how someone's using it. You've freely given that gift to them. And then you can kind of like one of Elder Kieran's talks in the last conference, just receive the gift. That's all you have to do. To have that gift is to receive it. So the other thing is she was using like some of her hard days. She's like, I don't know why. It just feels like kind of the language and where I'm at with it comes and goes and comes and goes, which maybe you would find this in other goals that you're trying to accomplish. It's like, sometimes I feel like I show up really well when I am at work and sometimes I just mess everything up, right? And so we just decided to kind of do a reality check. And isn't it true, you guys, that even in our native language, that sometimes we stumble and we stutter and we can't get out clear or coherent thoughts? That's maybe not God taking away a gift. Maybe that just is us having a human kind of experience, and that will happen whether you're excellent at the language or whether you're not excellent at the language. Like, it's just the way that it goes sometimes. If you're tired or if you're not focused or if you're having a bad day, these are normal fluctuations, right, of the language kind of coming and going. It's not a punishment. God is not out to get you and take your language away from you. Maybe it's just normal. So you could try that thought on for size and see how you feel when you think it. Okay, the number 5, this was a super interesting thing, is like the one sister who just kept saying, well, I want to communicate better. And so I kind of challenged her a little bit and I was like, okay, but are you already communicating? And she said, well, no, I can't really communicate the way I want to communicate. And I said, well, is that true? And so as she thought about it a little bit, she's like, well, no, actually, I think, I am communicating. And so then we talked about this idea that maybe communication is less about grammar perfection and language proficiency. And real communication, you guys, maybe comes through intent and through the Spirit. Have you noticed how you can communicate things without saying a word? That there is kind of a spirit there or an intention there that gets communicated even though we're not super proficient. It actually reminds me of several years ago, someone came to our stake and they did a fireside about these missionaries called shadow box missionaries. I'm pretty sure what they called it. If I'm saying it wrong, you guys email me and let me know. I'd like to know. But I was so fascinated because it's like there's such a language barrier that they actually can't communicate with ASL or anything else, that they basically communicate with pictures, and then they let the Spirit do the rest, the conversion. Can you imagine this, you guys? But this is what I'm talking about. It was so incredible that like the Spirit and the intent and the message can come across whether you know how to conjugate a verb or not. And I dare say that even if you're perfect at knowing how to conjugate a verb in Spanish or French or whatever language you're learning, I dare say that even the perfect conjugation doesn't always communicate the same message, the same intent, and the same Spirit. So this is kind of an epiphany I had, and I might be wrong. You can think about this however you want to. But I was thinking, what if the gift of tongues is less about language mastery and more about heart-to-heart communication, intention, and understanding? And so after this discussion, she realized, wait a second, I am communicating. It matters less that I get this language perfect. Now, here's the beautiful thing about this is a lot of people will say, oh, well, if I just think about it that way, then I'm not actually going to get better at the language. Number one, it's okay if you don't. And number two, if you do decide to, it will come from such a beautiful place. It won't come from lack. I have this quote in my office, and it's by Helen Keller, which is really interesting given the fact that, Helen Keller was both deaf and, wasn't she deaf and blind? I'm pretty sure. And this is a quote from her and all the things she was able to accomplish. She said, be happy with what you have while working for what you want. So be happy with the way that you're able to communicate now, or whatever it is your goal is, where you're at, and still work on what you want to work on. Okay. Number 6, here was the last thing, is one of the pressures one of the missionaries was putting on themselves is like, I'm here to learn a language. Like she even confided in me that it was when her mission was really hard at the beginning, she said, it's one of the reasons I decided to stay is so I could get proficient in Spanish. And she said, I already know French and I really want to get good at Spanish as well. And so she said, but so what if I don't learn it by the end? And so I asked her, what if you don't learn it by the end? Then what? Right? We use this fear and this ultimatum as if we think it's going to motivate us. But you know what we do when we're afraid of something is we hide and we do less. So I just asked her, I said, what would you do if you didn't know the language as well as you wanted to? And she's like, well, I don't know. I'd either be okay with that, or I would take another class at college or somewhere else to continue studying it. Like if it's actually a language you want to learn, you will keep learning it. Like the mission isn't just the end of your growth and your change that is allowed to happen, your learning. The mission is not the end, for sure, right? You can learn all kinds of things in the rest of your life, okay? So please try not to add in that drama like, oh, I have to learn this within this set amount of time. Don't compare yourself to other missionaries that say, oh, well, I learned it within 6 months, so you should too, or I should too. No, there's no end game. There's no end point. And like we've discussed already, maybe it matters way less your perfect conjugation of verbs and accents and syllables, right? That matters way less than just your desire and your intention to communicate with love and care and understanding and kindness. That matters way more, I think. So remember, these concepts, hopefully you can find a way to apply them whenever you sort of hit this plateau where you notice like I'm just kind of coasting now, right? And you can use them for language study. You can use them for a lot of other kind of goal things to go ahead and just make an evaluation, and just for sure don't do what you want to do from fear or because you think you need to prove something or because you have these expectations or pressure or comparison, right? Do stuff just because it sounds fun, just because you want to, okay? Remember, this plateau or this like place where we feel a little stuck isn't like preventing you from anything. When you can work through it, it's actually part of the climb to get to where you want to go, okay? So focus on your why, clean up your thoughts, right? And keep doing what you do because you want to and because you love other people, because you love God, and because you love yourself. All right, everyone, have the most amazing week, and we'll talk to you next time. Serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints can present a unique set of challenges, and mindset and emotional well-being is more important than ever. So thanks for being a part of this community, where we share real-life mission stories, support each other through struggles, and keep creating the mission and post-mission experiences that we truly want. Don't forget to check out the show notes for additional resources and share this episode with someone that you think might need it. Thanks so much for being a part of my world, and know this: no matter which part of the mission experience you are involved in, Jenny, the LDS mission coach, is thinking about you every single day.